Welcome back. We're here. Season 2 of Show and Teller. I'm Rabbi Mordechai Teller, and I got Greg Berman producing this, and we are here with a whole new format. We're very excited about what's about to happen in this season. We are bringing on some esteemed guests where I will have the opportunity to interview them, to ask them huge questions, to get the scoop on really what their life is all about, become inspired, and really just figure out a way that we as a group can get close, learn, grow, and have the opportunity of really coming away with some excitement, some passion, some purpose, and meaning. And what better way to do that than bringing on some incredible guests? And for the first guest of season 2, I'd like to ask a good friend of mine, somebody who I've become very close to. I was actually fortunate enough to do this individual's wedding. I stood under the chuppah with him. I'd like to ask Glenn Heilbronn, who is here with us today, to grace us with his story and to woo us with his wisdom and share his very personal account of what has taken place with him over the course of the last, I'll say 10 years more so, but more so in the last 2 years. I would say I don't know anybody who's been through maybe as much as Glenn. So without further ado, I'd like to start off and ask Glenn. Glenn, thanks so much for being here.
What a pleasure. What a pleasure. Rabbi Teller, the mensch, the man, the reason I am no longer single. He did the doing, we did the doing, and now I am wearing the doing. Happily sitting here with you.
So I think we should just get into it. Is that a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, said, I want you to meet somebody who I'm close to. And my meeting point is Coffee Bean.
Immediately.
In the Pico Robertson area.
Immediately.
And immediately I see this strapping, handsome young individual. And if we're going to be speaking honestly, I see this young individual, Glenn, with a cane. And I say to myself, okay, you typically don't see somebody who's in his early 30s, who's strong, who's handsome, walking with a cane. And Glenn actually ended up saying to me, Rabbi, I just don't like sitting down. I'll get really antsy. Can we take a walk? And we went on a walk around the Pico Robertson area, and Glenn went into his story, and he shared with me why he's walking with a cane. And honestly, when I heard that story, I said, Glenn needs to be speaking to the world. Glenn needs to be sharing his story. Glenn needs to be putting it out there, what he's been through. And I think the viewership can end up becoming completely inspired and figuring out, okay, living with a life of purpose, living with a life of meaning, living with a life of intention. And it might not have been, I imagine Glenn didn't say, you know what, going forward in my life, I would like to be walking with a cane. But now that Glenn is walking with a cane, which he'll share his story, why he's walking with a cane now, how do you make the most out of it? How do you make the most out of life when life throws you curveballs? When we have plans and God laughs and essentially says, I know something better. I know something that you need to grow from this incident. And that's been something that we talked about in season 1. But now I'd like to put it into real life play and asking our viewership, the people who are on this show, how was it that you, Glenn, overcame such a tremendous challenge in your life? And I'd like to ask you, just a little bit about yourself and how did you end up here?
Well, I think mainly I did it for the cane. It's a really cool cane. This guy in the Ukraine made it for me. It's my Ukrainian war effort assistance over there. Like, it's not official. He obviously doesn't work for the Ukrainian government, but he makes a really good cane. So that's what I did it for. And then all the other stuff, the getting blown up, getting kidnapped.
Blown up, getting kidnapped?
Yeah, there was a couple interesting things that happen along life's path. I think we all have our own stories.
Getting blown up, getting kidnapped? I don't know if...
Some people buy mangoes and they slip in the mango aisle. I slipped and fell on a couple shoulder-mounted rockets. that were shot at me. Everybody has their trials and tribulations. And I think at the end of the day, that is sort of the fuel that builds up who we are. Past 10 years of my life have been interesting, like you mentioned. I just finished serving in my second war, which was definitely not something I planned to do. In 2014, finishing some army service in Israel, I was lucky enough to catch the beginning of one war, which was Operation Protective Edge in 2014. And then luckily I was retired from the military medically. And now after being reintroduced to the military for about a decade of reserve service, I got to take part in another war. But why don't we do a slight rewind?
Okay.
Let me do a really quick spark notes for you guys just to save us some.
Yeah, I mean, I just jumped right in and I didn't get to ask who's
Rabbi
Glenn.
got to talk about a lot of cool things that I would love to share with you guys.
Yes,
but like, it's
please.
his show. It's his show. He wants
Sometimes you just got to get their attention and be like, what are we talking about? But now let's find out Glenn, the myth, the legend, and how Glenn ended up here. And I guess we'll pick up back to his war stories, literally his war stories. But let's find out how he got there.
Let's do it. I think a great place we could go back to is when I made Aliyah in 2011.
How old were you?
Now, I was about 21 years old. I had your quintessential American life growing up in Toronto. And
For all the Canadians out there, that's in Canada.
It was a little giggle for you guys.
Yes.
And I had gone on Birthright through some situation where
Birthright is what again?
Birthright is a program that is subsidized by some donations from Jewry around the world that allow students and young people to experience Israel, the most important parts of it, the old, the new, the life, the love, and the spiritual, for an opportunity that most people don't get the chance to do. It's quite expensive at the end of the day. But I got the chance to go on that program when I was about 20. And I had some family there, so there was a double meaning for me to go. My uncle was sick. He was going to pass away with cancer, so I needed a reason to get over there. And after 10 days of touring the most amazing sites in Israel, and you get to see everything that makes you become addicted to the land. For me, it was Shabbos. I was walking down the street in the Old City. And
The Old City in
Jerusalem, and it just snaps in your head. You're like, there's no reason I shouldn't be here. Nobody walks by me anywhere else in the world and has a smile on their face and zero contempt in their eyes and says, Shabbat Shalom. I don't have it. It doesn't exist. Another story. So I fell in love, and I started filling out my paperwork when I got back to Toronto, 2011, February 28th. I landed in Israel on my immigration flight from United States, from Toronto. Look at that! I've been here for so long. I'm like, I not even care about my life in Canada. It's not important. No, I'm kidding. I love Canada. You guys are great. Dangerous what's going on there now. Anyways, I landed in Israel, and I shit you not, I kissed the floor.
You just felt overcome with the
It was like I felt almost this connection to something that was like vibrating, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to lick the tarmac, but I got to Jerusalem after a while and got to the Old City, and instead of going up and kissing the wall, I kissed the floor.
Right.
Because technically, there's still
it says it's your home.
And since then, that place has buried itself deep inside my heart. I've lived all over. I got the chance to learn Israel in the north. Learn Hebrew in the north of Israel. And Kibbutz Mishmar Emek, a kibbutz, small community, a bunch of people live together and work together. Google it. Really not that complicated. I promise it's not like communism, but like it's a little communism, but it's like not communism.
Socialism.
Something along the lines.
Yes.
But everybody's really happy, and I enjoyed learning Hebrew there. And then after that, you guys sign up for the military. You sign up to which unit you go to. And I so badly didn't want to go to tanks that I ended up going to jail for 3 days because I didn't
know that part of the story.
It was military jail, so it's like kind of doesn't really count. But they send you there if you refuse to go to your unit. And I said, I'm going infantry, going paratroopers, or I'm going Givati, or Tzanchanim, or, the cool guys, the Marines. And they said, okay. So they let me rot in jail for 3 days. And
you got your way, ultimately, at the end of the day.
One day,
They ain't
the
gonna
third
push
day,
you.
they show up and they throw a pair of black boots at me. Paratroopers have red boots, in case anybody knows. I get a pair of black boots, and they're like, get on the bus. I say, I'm not getting on no bus. Tell me where I'm going. This is me learning to be Israeli at this moment, okay?
Chutzpah. We call it chutzpah.
Yeah.
For those who don't know what chutzpah is, it's being brazen.
It's
having
grit.
it's having a little bit of
Grit. Yeah.
You say what you want.
Yeah. Why not?
So you're a chutzpah dick.
So I was Mr. Chutzpah, and then they came and gave me a pair of black boots, and they're like, get on the bus, and I ended up going to Givati, which is the Marines, and I spent the next about 2 years training, serving. I served all over. I got to serve on the border of Egypt, where there was drug smugglers. I got to serve on the border of Syria in 2013, where we set up a field hospital for injured Syrians. Really weird situation that most people don't even know about, and you would call nonsense if you're, not reading an Atlantic article about it. But, we did it, and then I spent about 7 months in the city of Hebron, in Ma'aret Machpelah, the Tomb of the Patriarchs. It's where
our patriarchs and matriarchs, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, not Rachel, they're all buried there. So it's a very holy place in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel.
And it's a holy place for everybody. So you really find this sort of spicy intersection between tourists, Israeli border guards, Israeli military, just Palestinians living in the area, and Jews living in the area. It was an interesting 7 months. It gave me a robust understanding of the dialogue and subtext going on in Israel, especially because I served with Bedouin, Muslim guys. I served with Christian guys. I served with Jewish guys. We served from guys all over the world. We had Guatemalan, Peruvian. We had a Chinese guy. That was interesting. Chu Chao. Love you, Chu Chao. Never, ever met a full-on Chinese Jewish guy.
So did these people become like your, as we'd say in Hebrew, your chaverim, your brothers? Did you feel like you were all a big family, like part of the unit? Or, if not necessarily they weren't Jewish, but you became friends with some of these people.
You are thrown into the hot pot, the sort of deep end of the cultural immersion. And you have to trust these people with your life in a fraction of a second. And you find a way to. Don't get me wrong, not everybody's perfect, and there's a schmuck, as we say, or as my grandmother would say, a schmageg. That was a good one. There's not everybody's an angel, You're talking about a country of soldiers that have to serve. If it's a country, you're going to have a couple rotten eggs. It's standard. But being in the unit I was in, I was, let's say, though, in the lighter complexion of the gentleman and on the minority side of it. There was about 3 or 4 of us that were of the lighter complexion of Jewry, and then the rest of them were some interesting characters that came from all over Israel. You wouldn't believe. Jews have an insane capacity to live and thrive anywhere. And our enemies call us a cancer because of it. And I say that's quite the opposite. We're more like a mushroom. I love this because I made this joke the other day and I get to say it again on the podcast. I'm very excited. But we're like mushrooms. So excited to hear it. We're mushrooms. We're Jewish mushrooms.
Spores.
Because we create, mushrooms are mycelium.
Yeah.
So we use a micellular network between us.
Very good. So I like that.
Dad joke out there for everybody.
Soon to be.
Really cringy.
Whenever that happens, yes.
It hurt when I said it, but
it works.
Micellular network. That's what we're using, and we create these connections. And it's ingrained in the teachings we have from when we're kids, to the experience I had in Israel, to the experience I had living in Israel afterwards for years and years until I left in 2020. It's a connection.
So you were living in Israel from 2013, 2014?
So
till 2020.
I moved to Israel in 2011.
Okay.
And I left Israel in 2017 periodically, and then I would come back and forth until about 2020 when I moved away officially.
And how old were you in 2020 when you moved away?
I was about 30. I had been through the ringer. I had moved to Israel, served in the military, continued in reserves. After being injured, I rehabbed. I studied in university, college in Israel. That is now a recognized university. I have to shout out to IDC because now they're Reichman University.
Okay.
And I got to study
So
with
you became
some of
a fluent Hebrew speaker?
way before. When you join the military, you are asked to go to Hebrew training. It's called Mikvelon. It's just a base, but it's a program they put you through to basically increase your capacity to interact with military level and high level, combat related dialogue. And it's intensive. The kibbutz was intensive. It was 4 months of Hebrew learning every single day, and then you get in the army, you have another 3 months of Hebrew learning every single day. So they give you the tools, and if you want to learn, you learn. I learned fluent Hebrew, and people can't even tell the difference when I'm speaking. They say, how do you have that accent? And it's because I gave a shit when I was learning. There's a thing, is you got to be able to call somebody's mother a whore properly, and then they respect you in Israeli society. Yeah.
That's something we should all aspire to do. And
I hope you don't bleep this. Yes, Haramid. So I got to do about a decade of school, life, work, army. I got to peer through the looking glass into something that most people don't even know exists. Actually, they have a complete opposite perspective of it. So I'm just over here trying to open up this dialogue.
So you come back to, now not back to Canada, you now actually come back to the States, since we've been quoting the States this entire talk. You come back to the States.
4 years in the States now.
You got a job at doing what?
So for about a decade, a little bit in Israel, a little bit all over the world, I had the opportunity to be an executive security professional for some of the wealthiest, most politically connected people around the world, which also gave me another looking glass into true dialogue, true occurrences, real business happenings. And without dropping too many names, it's mostly celebrities, heads of cities, states, things like that. It's a decade of putting my life in front of other people for a living, being physically active, ready at all times, living in a sense of stress,
protecting other people, thriving
in a sense of in a scenario of protection, because that's what I always thought I was meant to do. Since I was a kid, there's a picture of me with a Tzahal IDF hat on when I was in Jerusalem at 6-7 years old.
Maybe you'll send us that picture. We can show our audience that picture.
We don't often relate to our younger selves in our adult lives, but that picture strikes
who you are. So let's fast forward. So from 2020, then you're here in the States. You're on reserve duty. You're working in a high-profile type of environment, doing security, protecting, doing events, things like that. And then 2023 happens. October 7th, 2023 happens.
I just started with a new firm. I was working with a celebrity. Oh, I wish I could tell you their names. Not everybody hates us. I need you guys to know this. Not everybody hates us. What you see out there is the loud people. There's a lot of really awesome people out there that don't hate us. And just for this little bit, to those people right now, thank you. Love you. Keep doing it. But yeah.
So comes along 2023,
just
October 7th, which is, it was a very, since the Holocaust, was the single most atrocious day for the state of Israel, where there were more than 1,000 people that were brutally murdered, raped, captured, and it sparked a global awareness, if you want to call it, and we're currently still involved in it right now, where Israel is fighting a war, and the the Jewish people in the diaspora are fighting a political war right now, and we don't need to get political on this. We really don't. But Jews from around the world are now being put on are on high profile, whether we like it or not. We are under a magnifying glass, and we are people. We're basically seeing who are our friends, who are our allies, and we're also seeing right now who are our enemies and who has a lot out for us. We'll say it that way. So that's my little bit of an intro into what maybe if people don't know what we're going through right now. Since October 7th, that is what we have had to endure as a Jewish people. So October 7th happens, and your reserve duty, and how many days after October 7th do you receive a phone call? And what did that phone call or that letter or that email say or consist of?
It wasn't days.
It wasn't days?
It wasn't days. I got messages from some local friends who were former military. I had already, 3 years been living in Los Angeles, and I was just sitting on my couch in the morning because Israel time, this happened, early hours of the morning. And the info only got out much later. I was hearing from, like I said, my military friends close by that were mentioning there's a terrorist attack and sirens. Now, for anybody who doesn't really know the situation, sirens, it's become a normal thing, which is insane.
And when you hear sirens, what did that previously to October 7th indicate?
That indicated that there were missiles coming from either Gaza or Lebanon or somewhere else or Yemen or Iran.
And why did people not necessarily react previously to October 7th if they hear it? Because what would happen typically, or what technology does Israel have that would make it that we don't necessarily have to be that scared?
The existence of the Iron Dome is not by any means a justification. The missile system that shoots down rockets aimed at Israel is not by any means a justification that missiles into your country are and should be any sense of a norm. That should be the farthest thing from a norm. Yet that's the day-to-day norm in Israel. It's been since I moved there. When I moved there, the first week, a rocket landed on the beach in Tel Aviv 100 meters from me because I wasn't smart enough to get into a shelter. And it was quite a large rocket. It landed in the water. Thankfully, it didn't do too much damage because it malfunctioned along the way. But that was a wake-up. That was my first 3 weeks in Israel, I think. I was just in Tel Aviv, and a rocket falls out of the sky. And then you're like, this is real. This isn't nonsense. So everybody around the world who's saying, it's over-exaggerated, you have Iron Dome, it does its best.
But not foolproof.
But that
and
is
not God.
And that is not God. That's not an explanation of why it's okay for us to have missile rain. What?
Got it. So basically, October 7th happens. You're hearing information before, because you have intel on the ground who's basically telling you there's a legitimate terrorist attack. Now, when you hear that, you're saying, okay, probably not as bad as we, or
I
what?
just thought it was as we say in Hebrew, it's a pigua, it's an attack. And the fact that also didn't stir much is a very worrying sign. That I'm expecting at least a guy to run down Dizengoff like it happened when I was sitting having a beer. Guy ran down the street with a knife and just started stabbing random people. So a bunch of us got up and chased him down and arrested him. But that is what I expected. I expected a terrorist attack as my first response. And that's terrible. That my first response is missiles are okay. And the terrorist attack, it's just probably one guy with a knife or two guys with a gun. They probably killed 2-3 people. And then the horror starts unfolding. And you start getting images on Signal, and you start getting messages from your friends. And you get a message like I received from my officer later that evening on the 7th. Sorry, it was on the 8th. It was on the 8th. Later that evening on the 8th, I received a message from my officer. And I said, we're going in. Are you coming? No, he didn't.
Because what did you hear up to that? I mean, we just jumped from, okay, we thought it was maybe one terrorist running down the street, some missiles, but what were you hearing?
The video started rolling in.
Maybe
the
people don't know.
Footage from people's balconies as terrorists with machine guns, we call them technicals, connected to the back of a pickup truck, are driving through Ofakim and shooting a man and his daughter on the street. And you realize this is not anything I was prepared for. This is not anything I've seen before. How is this happening? You have like almost a disbelief. It's not surreal. This isn't real. This is AI. This is something. This is from Iraq in the middle of the invasion or the Syrian revolution. This isn't in Israel. This can't be. How could this happen? We have the best security services in the world. We have the best guards in the world. We have the best soldiers in the world. We're praised as being the best. How could this happen? And then more, and texts, and pictures, and calls. And so I say, I have to call him. So I called my officer, and I said, what's going on? He said, I'm on my way to base. How quickly can you get to Israel? And I said...
Implying I need you here.
Well, yeah. My job in the military over the last 10 years of reserve duty and rehab has allowed me to return to full service. I was a sergeant of intelligence inside of our platoon, so I commanded the relationship between the intelligence corps and my officer. I was also battalion, not just platoon, but battalion navigator. So I was what's called the recon squad in the front of the entire battalion, me, my officer, and a radio man and a machine gunner. Our job is to identify targets. I had a marksman rifle, which allowed me to shoot them from a further distance away. So I was to take the commanders, and then we were to move forward after that. I also was trained in explosives before this war a couple years ago, and I had the opportunity to have a refresher on a lot of new materials that we'd be using. So let's just say I had a lot of jobs to do, and unfortunately there weren't a lot of other individuals who had all of the skills that our squad needed. So I looked at my girlfriend of the time.
Who you're now?
Now my wife. Love her to death. I'll talk about more her later. But I looked at her and I said, I don't know what to say. I don't have any way to convey what I know I needed to do and what a lot of people felt we needed to do. And I tried my best. We spoke about it for about a day or two. I was trying to find flights the entire time. We spoke about it briefly because what are you supposed to say to your person that you've identified could be your life partner?
As your Besheret, as your life partner.
And you look at them and you're like, I have to go to war. To be fair, I did preface this at the beginning of our relationship, and I think everybody should go into relationships with 100% transparency. If you're willing and capable of going to war, you should probably tell your partner that before you start dating, just so they understand. It's clear communication. So she knew what I had to do.
So, I mean, we did talk about this in a previous discussion. There are 5 levels of pleasure. There's physical pleasure, which is the lowest level pleasure. There's love, which is a higher level of pleasure from physical. Then there's meaning. Then there's power/creativity. And then having a relationship with the Almighty himself. So this made me, what you were just saying is like, you could love this person, 4th level of pleasure, love this person tremendously. You do anything for her. You love her. But you're willing to go and put yourself in harm's way, put your life on the line for something extremely meaningful, extremely what you stand for, essentially, and say, like, I love you, honey, more than anything. You are my life. But there's something inside of me that I'm living beyond just the here and the now. That's something that expands beyond Glenn. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like I'm part of the Jewish people. I'm part of the land of Israel. Like, this has extended from 3,000 years ago till where we are now in history, and hopefully, God willing, until the times of the end of days. But I need to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Is that maybe what you were thinking? Like,
That was definitely it. I knew that before we even started dating, we had sort of a conversation on date 5 where we put down the brass tacks. We each had an actual list. This was the greatest. We each had a list of the things we needed in each other and in a partner. And we didn't demand either one's list from the other person. We just looked at each other's list and said, you know what, ours look very compatible. And on that day, on the 7th or the 8th, when I looked at my girlfriend and I said, this is a terrible situation. I think I have to go. And let me preface for her sake, I was supposed to be in an office. So that kind of made it a little bit easier to go. So I didn't really know I was going to be walking into Gaza. But
did you lie? Or
I definitely did not know. I promise my wife, who's listening, Mary, I did not know. I was told I had a job to do in the office.
Got it. So you got to Israel.
I landed on the 10th.
You landed on the 10th, October 10th, 3 days into full-on war and a very scary, unknown, like literally, quote unquote, a bomb exploded, even though it wasn't a real bomb, but there was a bomb that exploded in Israel, and people are just trying to figure out what's going on with Gaza, where are the hostages, how many hostages, trying to find all the remains of the people who had been murdered, et cetera, et cetera. So you're going into literally, as we'd say it, a war zone. And at one point did they say, oh, by the way, you're not going to be sitting in this office. You're going out.
Well, I think we all understand that when you go into a war zone, irrelevant of what your job is, you're stepping into a dangerous environment, even if you're in an office. I was in an office many times throughout my military history, and mortars often tend to fall right near my office. Call it bad luck. But when you enter an environment like that, I landed and I went straight to Tel Aviv to one of my best friends, Jake Kobe, also an American guy. Went straight to his house and I put my stuff down. I told him, do you mind watching over my stuff while I go? And he's too injured to go back to his unit. So him and his wife were going to store my stuff for me. And he looked at me the second I walked through the door and he just burst out crying. Like ugly crying, like good cry, but terrible because he's seeing me under these circumstances. You see your friend who you wish to see every day. This is my best friend. And when you wish to see him all the time and you only get to see him now every time you come back to Israel. And this time, it's not a vacation. This is the last hug he gave me. For him, at least. That was the last hug he was ever going to give me. And then I went to base. I went to the same base that I'd been serving for the past 10 years. It's in the south, not too far from Gaza. Thankfully, it wasn't attacked when they broke through on the 7th, but I went to my base, and my friends had been there for 2 days already. We walked into something that we thought was normal, that was comfortable, because we had been in this for 10 plus years. We have done this over and over again, the same base, put on our equipment, prepare ourselves. But we were preparing ourselves in all those cases for training or a posting to do guard duty in the middle of the desert or somewhere in the West Bank. This was war. We were going into a front-end face-on-face war.
Were you scared? Were you petrified? Or was the adrenaline so palpable that you're just like, I can't be scared right now? Like faced with death. Like you're not really there yet, but you know that it's imminently you're gonna be walking into a lion's den.
We were supposed to go in on the 15th. It was
You already were
planning,
told.
logistical
You
error.
said you're
Yeah.
going to go in on the 15th.
Well, we were prepped to go in on the 15th, but there was a logistical error. Some information got leaked, and that didn't happen. Instead, on the 15th, I went over to the kibbutzes and the Nova site and assisted in security and body cleanup. So that was my plunge into the war. To park my Hummer with my officer, get out of the Hummer, look down to my right, and see one of the magazines from the terrorist AK-47 sitting there, empty, every bullet having pierced a Jewish body. And it's just sitting there in the middle of the road days later. On the other side of the street, the terrorist who was killed was lying there still 2 days later. And that's when I had to switch off. That you have to do your job. Like I noticed in 10 years of security, you have to be a professional, and much like a doctor enters a surgery room and they'll decide that there's emotionality and professionalism, and I can't be professionally effective if I'm emotional. So much like in the military in the beginning, they train you to focus on the situation, irrelevant to the circumstances around you. And that's what I did. I picked up the magazine, took it with me, and I still have the rubber band that was wrapped around it to hold it in place in the AK-47. Couldn't bring the magazine back, and it's probably for the best. But that was my plunge into the war. I showed up, I got a bunch of equipment that was from the 1980s, and
This is what they gave you.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So
We were
not
supposed to
not
be-
the most highly technological, not in the 2020s. This is 1980 stuff that was probably in a box somewhere, hadn't been used for a while, and they're like, well, it's wartime, and
we're just reserves. It's just reserves. They don't need the best equipment. There's full-time regular service guys that need the best equipment. My flak jacket looked kind of like this, but just green, and it had a bit of a collar, and it would kind of protect you from like fragmentation, but no bullets or anything like that. So that was what most of us had to go in with. We didn't actually have equipment in the beginning. Lucky for me, I brought my own vest. I'd been doing this for a long time, so I had my own equipment. So I brought it with me on the flight over on LL. Imagine getting on a plane, them seeing your vest, this young guy, and them putting me in first class. Because a young man should not be getting on a plane with a vest to go to war because some terrorists decided to come in and murder our people for nothing. But I had my own equipment, and I was comfortable. And we went there. We picked up the bodies. We helped the unit that picks up the bodies, special Jewish unit. I'd like to shine some light on them for a sec. They're all rabbis. It's a special forces unit.
It's not Zaka.
No, they are military personnel, soldiers, all of them officers, all of them special forces, and they are all trained to do one thing and one thing only, and that is halachically recover Jewish bodies.
Halachically means lawfully, according to Jewish law, recover bodies, because
In the most respectful
in the
manner.
most respectful way, and one of the biggest, most respectful Jewish laws that we can follow is bury a dead body and do it in a very respectable manner.
The most wholesome way.
And it's the most unconditional mitzvah. Again, mitzvah means opportunity that one can connect with God, because most of the times, a lot of times when people are doing a mitzvah, I'll do something for you, let's just say, there's a tit for tat component from it, where if I do something for you, I'll have somewhat maybe underlying expectation that you might be doing it, that you're going to return the favor back for me. When it comes to a dead body, it's the mitzvah that can't give back. So when you bury a dead, you're not going to get anything back in return other than really doing the mitzvah, because that person is dead. They can't return the favor back to you. So when we bury the dead, it shows that we're doing it in a complete respect and making sure that they end up back where they came from, essentially.
And I think that, without getting too off topic, that speaks to what a lot of our soldiers went in to Gaza with our we went to war in our minds, is that we, to the last effort we have before we die, we hope to go in the most shalem, whole way.
Complete.
And these guys that I had the opportunity to provide security for were doing something, sifting through burnt cars and smashed up puddles of body parts to find out which specific bone went with which body.
Because we need to identify who's who.
But not just that, is that it to the last bit of bone ground into dust into the floorboards of a burnt out car. We recovered those too, and we put them with the bodies.
Taking a deep breath. So Glenn, let's pick up to the day that you actually went in.
So it was a couple weeks after.
So what day was that?
So we actually ended up, like I mentioned, we had the cancellation on the 15th, and then we continued training, grabbing more equipment. Luckily, 2 days before our actual entrance, all of us got delivered our vests, our equipment. And we had bulletproof vests that had been donated by a private donor and shipped to Israel. So not only did we get the armor inside the vest, but we got the vests, pouches, all the accessories that our machine gunners, our medics needed. We got backpacks full of equipment, of medical supplies. Unfortunately, the majority of it was private donors, but that's because they mobilized 200% of a reserve force in the span of like less than 30 days. So nobody really blames Israel for the equipment situation. We've never experienced something like this. Equipment-wise, this was more difficult than the Six-Day War, which is wild to think about.
The graph had to get shot up. That the vector had
so many more people, so much
Right.
more equipment, so many more bits of all the way down to food and tape. You know, a little roll of tape.
Right.
Having enough tape means having enough explosives, means having enough food, means having. It's all an entire country being mobilized because we mobilized against an existential threat.
So,
Had we not stopped them, it would have kept going.
Yeah. It's crazy.
They would've just kept going.
Thinking about it, just the how the backs were against the wall and they had to just jump up, and there had to be enough smart people who could be the project managers, who could be like
Act independently.
and be like, this needs to happen, and if this doesn't happen, where we don't have enough tape, then a very small, minute detail might fall through the cracks. So, what date did you actually go?
On the 29th of October 2023, bus came to pick me and my unit up. We had 3 buses.
And they told you days before, they told you you're going today.
When the buses came to pick us up, we were aware for about a day before. Less. You get about less than 24 hours, and you're told to call home, not give any details, but say that you will call as soon as you're available, and that you just simply will be unavailable for a few days. And you send your love. And a few days before this, I recorded my video will at 34 years old. That was weird. Still have it. I get to watch it every now and then, so that's fun. And then we got on the buses. Gave us a tuna sandwich, had a smoke, and got on our way. We drove from our base a couple hours in a very, very random direction. Not straight because of the constant conflict that was going on in the areas and the inability to know whether or not they had spotters. We took a very drastic route to get to Kibbutz Erez. And after,
which is still in Israel.
Still in Israel proper. And after dismounting under a highway overpass and resting for about an hour, we prepared to walk into Gaza. By foot.
By foot. Like here, Gaza's 20 feet away, and you're walking into Gaza.
Gaza's definitely not 20 feet away. If you look on a map, it was a solid 3-4 kilometers that we walked with all of our equipment just to get in and through Erez. And then once we had entered Gaza, in the cold of the early morning, and the dusk, and the dew, and a very surreal fog that sort of floated on you, we crossed over the fence and walked into Gaza. about 200 meters. And then we turned around and
they don't have their guards there on that side waiting to be like, what are you coming into the land? It was empty at that place, at that juncture where you guys crossed through.
So as we crossed over from Israel territory to Gaza territory, we went through the hole that Hamas had made in the fence coming into Israel. We used the same hole to go back into Gaza. And there was nobody on the other side waiting for us because thankfully our artillery and our Air Force managed to push back a specific amount of area so that we were able to access inside of the northern strip. Oddly enough, we walked in about 100, 200 meters, and then we turned around and walked back out because there was confusion in whether or not some people had been confronted with enemy or there was booby traps. So we pulled out. And we actually ended up sitting until the early hours of the morning. The sun came up. And at that point, we loaded up again. And the second time crossed over that same threshold. And the second time sort of made it less unbelievable. He said, oh, I've been here before, a couple hours ago. It's not so bad. Place is nice. Trees, breeze. But we were walking in giant tank treads. And we continued to walk all the way until the sun had come up and we had made our way through a bunch of orchards that had plants and fruit still on them. Of course, we're poisoned. You know, you could smell the chemicals that they had sprayed on all of them, just in case we decided to touch any of the fruits. But we moved slow. We moved very slow because there were tunnels everywhere. Our initial contact was less than half a kilometer inside. There was a little farmhouse that we had been told every area that has solar panels most likely has access to a tunnel. So I hope I'm allowed to say that now because it's pretty far in the war and a lot of that stuff has come out. But anyways, we knew they were there. And we saw a guy, so we called up a couple gentlemen and they relieved that gentleman of his nuisance, whatever he called the life, because he was essentially shooting at us from a very protected position. Not a very frontal gunfight. You have people shooting at you from very far away, from inaccessible positions. They're called murder holes. It's a very guerrilla combat tactic. So we eliminated that threat and moved on through the end of the orchard. And the first building we came upon was a school.
You're laughing about the school. I'm just curious what I don't necessarily know why you would be laughing about a school.
My face goes to where it is because I've been so inundated with nonsense about stuff that I'm told happened while I was there at the school. People will tell me Israelis do this and IDF do that to schools and we destroy them and we do horrendous war crimes. And none of that. We got to the school. We designated it as a school. We knew on the map it was a school. And we tried to move around it. It definitely wasn't our fault that an RPG came out of the window. And it definitely wasn't our fault that we decided, no, we're not going to threaten the lives of some of our soldiers and send them in there to try and defuse this 1-man or 2-man or 3-man fire team that's pot-shotting RPGs out of a window. No, that's a school. You've designated it not a school. You've designated it a terrorist encampment that you're using as a firing compound. So we told the tanks to drop the school. And they dropped the school. Like tanks should. And we moved on. As this moment passes, you see the sheer awe of a tank destroying a building.
So again, when you say dropping, it means it shot a weapon at the school.
It shot 2 large explosive rounds into the area that we were receiving rocket fire from. And
there were no kids there, though, at that point.
Not only were there no kids,
yes,
in that specific area, including kilometers past it, had been completely cleared of civilians. Anybody, much like in the invasion of Iraq, any military-age male in that area had only one purpose to be there. And every not military age male, the women, the old, the elderly, the kids, they're being used as human shields. But I'll get to that later. We approached a dangerous situation where we didn't even initiate the conflict. We didn't even initiate the firefight. We were rained on by RPGs while we were just walking through a field. And we responded in kind. After moving through past the rubble of this destroyed building.
Now, it sounds like you're not even in Gaza for more than 20 minutes at this point, and you're already being shot at, and you're already like engaged in combat.
So about 30, 40 minutes in Gaza, and there was that first instance, and then we continued walking, and there was this instance. At this point, we are still in the edge of the orchard at the top of a town called Beit Hanun. It's in the north of Gaza. And at this point, we start seeing bullets coming from our sides. And that's confusing because to one side, we had Special Forces paratroopers. And to the other side, a couple hundred meters, we had Special Forces Marines, Givati, like myself. And blue on blue is fine. It's friendly fire is fire, shooting at friendlies, usually a breakdown of communication, safety protocol. But we didn't think that was the situation here because from both sides, they were shooting towards our direction. So we simply laid down in the orchard as the bullets were zipping past our head on both sides, just cracking the leaves above us and falling on us. A lot of us started to laugh. I couldn't tell you why. But we started to laugh because it was just nonsensical. I rolled a cigarette. I was smoking. It was just an odd event. It turned out there was 2 tunnels, though, that had popped out in between our units, one on the right, one on the left. And those Special Forces units were engaging the terrorists that exited those tunnels. And the bullets that were flying over the terrorists were intersecting right above our heads. So that was a fun little introduction to bullets flying in your direction. But luckily, nobody was killed. Nobody was injured. Everything was fine. We moved forward. Just one of those things that happen. We say this thing in the Israeli military right now during war. It's called good fire. Like, that's not bad bullets. It's good bullets.
Okay, I guess
your concepts of reality start breaking down. And then you see the kids' clothing as you enter the city, strewn all over the floor. You see the books. You see the half-destroyed houses. You see the wires on the doors, booby-trapped. And you crack the door a little bit of the building, see the wire. You know there's an explosive on the other side of the door. And you can
so you're
just...
saying, so I'm understanding is that they're setting...
The entire city was set up with booby traps through almost every single entrance to almost every single building.
Knowing that you guys, Israel's going to come and open a door.
That was their first tactic, was to set mines and explosives to reduce our speed in moving through the city and eliminating the terrorists.
Now, again, I don't want to preempt the story, but just historically in this war in the early on stages, did some soldiers sadly pass away from these booby traps and stuff like that?
Unfortunately, even our most talented explosives ordnance individuals, they're not with us anymore because at the end of the day, a lot of these explosives are set up in ways, it's not a professional military. They're not setting up things they've been trained to do. These are tactics that were established through terroristic activities. So they don't have a safety. They don't have structural design. They don't have any sense of discrimination. And when we walked into these buildings and we tried to open these doors and we saw these wires, on the other side of the wire is a house. The kitchen, still food in the kitchen. Still stuff on the floor. Looks like somebody's house in Tel Aviv. Except blown up. And as we started moving through the town, we didn't actually get any resistance once that initial RPG incident happened. The resistance we received was once we had reached the house we were attempting to set up our command post in. It was called our Red House.
when you wanted to set up your command post there, it means you're going to set up your command post there, and then you're going to stay there for an undisclosed amount of time and use that as your post, not necessarily sleep there or be there for a couple days waiting. Just is that what that means?
So in most cases throughout the war, yes, that's been the case. But this was so early on in the war that we were the front line. So we were establishing FOBs, forward operating bases. The special forces were to establish theirs on each side of us, and we are to establish our command center in this house and continue pushing through the city. Unfortunately, as we entered this block of about 15 buildings, and our red house was in the middle, all of the buildings were still standing because the Israeli Air Force deemed it unnecessary to cause unnecessary collateral damage to the buildings in an attempt to, what I imagine, slow down the perceived humanitarian distress some would feel when you destroy a civilian complex of apartments. But that wasn't a civilian complex of apartments. Every single one of those buildings had been rigged to blow. So we walked into a horseshoe, quintessential worst place to be in a gunfight. A horseshoe of 5 to 7 story buildings that were all still standing. And as we entered the small house, 2 stories in the center of the square, the gates of hell opened on us. Over the span of 50 minutes, we were hit with approximately 12 rocket-propelled grenades, shoulder-fired RPGs, and Cornet missiles. Our tank was hit by a Cornet missile in the back of the tank, which disables a large majority of the tank, and the driver inside was impaled in the chest by a fragment. Injured, bleeding severely, our unit started evacuating the tank, and the many individuals who now had fragments of metal sticking out of their faces from interactions with rocket-propelled grenades. 2 such circumstances, we were under the impression that 10 of our soldiers had died instantly as an RPG came through the window of a 2-story building. One
RPG again means what?
Rocket-propelled grenade.
Okay.
A rocket came through the window of the 2-story building our team was in, both on the top and the lower story. Independent RPGs, independent rockets through the window. Everyone in the room got blown against the walls. And we imagined
Including
everyone
you.
was dead. I wasn't in the room. We imagined everybody was dead. And we got on the radio and said, 6 to 10 dead. 6 to 10 people in an instant, gone. And we started operating from that point on. We had less time to react than we initially expected, and our ability to react in the face of such an intense gunfight, nobody had prepared themselves for it. Nobody had the opportunity to mentally prepare themselves for the sheer amount of munitions that fell on our heads in such a small amount of time from every direction. We had snipers on every single rooftop. There was 5 to 7 gentlemen shooting rocket-propelled grenades. And one by one, the people we thought were dead, as we were fighting what we thought to be our last gunfight, they started popping up back through the building, showing up on the other side where me and my officer and the rest of the platoon were sitting, waiting, trying to establish a defense position, like ghosts, covered in shrapnel and blood and lips dusty and faces burnt.
At this point, are you guys firing back?
Oh, we're firing in every direction.
It's
a
literally
360-degree target-rich environment.
360 degrees. You're being fired at every,
From
as you said,
above.
a horseshoe.
From a
Essentially,
horseshoe.
they're firing in every direction, and you're right smack in the middle of this.
Standing out back of a 2-story building with no cover. At this point, our tank had successfully managed to pull back as its turret was randomly spinning from the damage. It took down half the building we were standing behind with its turret. And once it had managed to get back, the bulldozer, the D9 bulldozers that were armored, that were assisting us in moving the rubble, it was able to see my hand signals. And unfortunately, the radios frequencies, people back in our larger battalion compound that was 250 to 300 meters behind where this incident took place, and another 350 soldiers were waiting there. But they were unaware of what happened to us. They thought we were all dead. So I call over the bulldozer. Bulldozer comes, and one by one I start picking up my friends and putting them sort of back into reality, shaking them a bit, and they were able to, one by one, get behind the bulldozer and make their way to a rear position at the beginning of the horseshoe, where the initial booby trap building I mentioned with the wire was, and provide fire support from that corner there. Still exposed, still receiving fire from the behind, from the rear, but they establish a firing position to support us. And at this point, I sort of blacked out. Some friends of mine told me what happened.
Blacked out from the trauma, backed out from you got hit, backed out.
At this point, I had been essentially 0 feet away from 2 separate explosions. The initial tank explosion, which was about a foot, 2 feet away from me, and the RPG that hit on the corner of the floor, also right next to me. I had been sort of concussed severely, so I think that led to some of the blacking out. But also, a lot of people say it's that robot training that kicks in, your lowest level of preparation. Much like I say to people, the more you train, the better your lowest level of preparation. Turns out, through security and decade of reserve duty, my preparation wasn't terrible. And I managed to pick up a rocket that was sitting in one of the discarded bags that we had and walk into the middle of the street under a hail of gunfire.
You picked up an RPG.
So not an RPG. This was our rocket. They're called a LAW, a light anti-tank weapon. You've seen in the movies, they click and they open up, extend like that. You put it on your shoulder.
I mean, like Terminator 2 or something.
Exactly the same missile, except we had the upgraded version. And I picked one up, walked in the middle of the street under gunfire, got down on one knee, and shot it directly at the enemy building less than 100 feet away. Discarded the empty tube, walked back over to the other side of the building. At this point, we're being rained on with bullets. People are just huddling to try and not get hit with bullets. RPGs just exploding on the corners, and you hear them whoosh by. And I walked by a friend of mine, Gadi, one really great guy. He's providing cover fire, but he's focused, and he can't pay attention to me. He can't hear me. And he has a rocket on his back. I needed it. So I took that off his back. I'm not sure if I cut it off his back with my knife or something. But then I just walked around him, pushed him back against the wall. And for safety, I said, fire from behind, fire from behind. I did the whole safety procedure. Textbook. The instructors would have been so proud of me. But safety first, I leaned down in the middle of the street, bullets flying everywhere. And I looked straight up at a guy about 100 meters away, 50 meters away in a building, looking at me with an RPG.
Like face to face.
With Mexican standoff.
Like you see him looking at you.
I have law. He's got RPG, and we're looking at each other.
Whoever shoots this first.
No, he shot. He beat me to the punch. But it's very fast. It's a click, poof, gone. But it just foofed over my head.
You saw it foof over your head.
I saw the nipple of the RPG, of the rocket. It flies towards you, and it's got this very fat body and then a little nipple on the end of it. The Iranians helped them design it. Anyways, it's flying, and it just goes whoosh, like a baseball flying by my head. I felt the air.
And now you're like, well, I got my rocket. It's my turn now.
Well, I basically said, Opa, and I click. You use your 3 fingers, and you just click. And it's a very simple click. It's like, I'm not trying to minimize the severity of the situation, or I'm not trying to take away from the fact that, it's a life we're talking about here. But the execution of the action was such a simple series of events. I just walked out, got down on one knee, by luck, missed by a few inches by a rocket, and then I sent my rocket. The cloud of smoke came out of the window. I threw my rocket, the empty tube on the ground, and walked back to Gadi, and everyone's just staring at me like I'm some psychopath. And I just start picking the last few one of them up and throwing them back towards our fire position that they had set up further back using the using the bulldozer. And I remained behind with my officer.
Like I have to just quote a movie. I just feel like this is Saving Private Ryan at this point. Like
If I play the audio, it sounds like Saving Private Ryan. Just the sheer amount of bullets and noises and stuff like that. And I managed to get all but 4 of us behind the bulldozer before it pulled
like you're
back.
dragging people.
No, I just sort of picked them up. You know, a lot of people go fight, flight, freeze. There's about 5 or 6 of us who were able to get into the gunfight.
Get into the fight.
Everybody else reasonably, young guys, they froze. They weren't, used to being in a situation. But eventually they were able to get on their guns. Some of them were laughing. The guys who had shrapnel in their chest and in their face, they were smiling because you don't know how to react in this situation. You're a human. You're a normal person. You don't want this. You're not looking for this. These are just people.
I can't believe I'm in this. Can't believe I'm alive. Can't believe this is happening.
One guy's a chef. Like, what is he doing there? Let him go back to chefing.
This is not Cordon Bleu.
No. One guy's got a belly bigger.
Just a quick note, we're at an hour. We've got about 25 minutes left in the car. So.
Okay.
Let's get to the point. Yeah.
No, this is all really great stuff. Just,
Okay.
Keep it going.
Yeah, it was down to the last guy that was a little bit injured. We were able to get him back to the rear firing position. Our entire battalion still had not come to provide support. We were still alone because they were under the impression we were all dead. So once the tank had managed to make it back to them, they started providing cover fire from the top of a large sort of mound that we had built for cover where the entire battalion was. And they started providing cover fire so our guys could one by one start making their way back. I remained behind.
Like from above, they're allowing you guys to retreat essentially.
So they're shooting over our heads. They're only a couple meters above us on a mound of dirt, shooting over our heads. And the tank that is assisting us after the destroyed tank pulled back was shooting rounds over my head while I remained behind in the gunfight with my officer, another officer, and his radio man. We had to remain behind to make sure everybody was gone and pulled back, and none of the injured were left behind, and the equipment was destroyed. So we had to blow up the equipment, and that was damaged, so it couldn't fall into enemy hands. And then we started pulling back. The other officer, lower lieutenant, and his radio man peeled off as we provided cover, and then I pushed my officer, my platoon officer, my captain. I pushed him physically because I promised his wife before we got there that I was going to bring him home. That was my only job. And so I dragged his, as much as one could drag a human being under a gunfight, I pushed him all the way until we got back to the rear firing position. And I was shooting my gun with one hand behind me like a hilarious, terrible...
Like this,
yeah, one hand on pushing his vest and the other
first.
hand shooting my Tavor backwards like a psychopath. Because we just needed anything, any cover. I threw every grenade I had. There was guys, I didn't know at the time, but there was some Hamas Nukhba fighters, the Special Forces Hamas. They were about 5 meters away from us on the other side of the building, but we didn't know because we couldn't see them. And the tank was shooting at them. And it was a couple meters away from us. You should never shoot towards your own people in a tank, but at the end of the day, we needed some help. So in the video, you just see is a little itty-bitty Glenn in the background. And I'm just being rained on by my friends' bullets and the tank shells, hoping to hit the guys that are just behind us. Luckily, we managed to pull out. I pull back. Everybody gets back to our battalion stronghold.
If for those who remember at the beginning of this episode, I said you have a cane now. So
Yeah.
At what point you get injured? So when does that happen in this part of the story?
A lot of people are asking me, when is the one event? I was several meters away from multiple explosions. I was 0 meters away from multiple explosions. I was flipped upside down. I was carrying a 90-pound backpack while trying to drag other human beings and jumping in and out of destroyed buildings. And then I want to say that the straw that broke the camel's back was the final stretch from that rear firing position after being blown up, flipped, this, that, shot at, everything you can imagine.
You were like a cat with 9 lives at that point.
I was pushing my officer again to make it from our rear firing position back to the battalion stronghold, and my knees just realized that they had been holding on with nothing, and they both just gave out. And so I locked my knees and I kept walking. They weren't really functioning. I made it back to the hole where everybody was waiting, and they didn't believe that we were alive. They didn't understand how all of us were alive. Half of us looked like ghosts. Half the guy's equipment was blown in half. The tank driver's squirting blood out of his chest, and on a stretcher, our medic is on top of a stretcher doing open chest surgery. A medic, just a kid. And then it hits you when the adrenaline stops. I was held up by adrenaline. My entire body shut down. I passed out. I didn't know at the time, but I had a bleed in my brain. And
from one of the explosions.
One of the many. An artery behind my ear exploded, and my brain was bleeding for multiple days, and they didn't know that. As we loaded on the Hummers, and the super injured guys, the extremely critical guys, were initially raced out to a helicopter that was waiting.
Did any of your friends pass?
I'll get there. And he was raced out along with another individual, my friend Aryeh, who received about a dozen pieces of metal in his face, chest, point blank to an RPG that should have taken the lives of 5 people. And he was taken to a helicopter. Both of them were airlifted to a major hospital in Tel Aviv. We didn't know what happened to them. And I got to the Hummer to put the other injured soldier on. It was about 20 of the 30 of us who were injured. And the other 10 were able to stay in the fight for a couple more days. But I got to the Hummer, put the injured gentleman, including one of my squad mates, Jason. I put him on the Hummer. I turned around and lights out. My body just shut down. Just said, nope, I had enough. I also couldn't hear anything at this point because throughout the gunfight, I had lost my hearing protection. It got blown out of my right ear. And I had nothing besides screaming at this point. I woke up bouncing around in a Hummer about 20 minutes later on the way to Barzilai Hospital. A series of events that seems cinematic, nonsensical, probability speaking, irrational. And then all of us just said the same thing to one another when we got to the hospital. We were all looking at one another saying, how did we get out of there? Ech yatzanu misham. How did we leave there? There's no explanation. Oh, there is.
I'll get to that.
Thankfully, every single member of my team, including the tank driver, we all made it out, not only with our lives, but with almost all of our capabilities. Yeah. Eitan Tesler, the tank driver, wrote a book that's available out there in Hebrew about our experience. And there aren't many people who can say they got to test where the end of their willingness was, to find the end of their capacity. And for better or worse, I think that's what I was gifted through this whole situation. I got to see where everything breaks, and then what's after that. And then I still have a little bit after that. And that even though my body medically doesn't make sense why it's still standing, but it is. It's doing. And it dragged my officer Amit home to his little girl. And it dragged me back as I stood prepared to continue, mid-gunfight, to continue pressing towards the enemy. Before we pulled back, I felt Mary, my wife now's voice, and hands on me. And they stopped me. They said, no, you're enough. Come home. So I turned around and grabbed my officer and we left. And I went home. I brought him home and I came home.
You were in Gaza for 1 day.
3 days.
This was a 1 day, this battle that you just
This
described.
battle was 50 minutes.
This was 50 minutes of your life.
And I have GoPros from not only our soldiers, but unfortunately the body cameras that the terrorists were wearing. I also have those. So I get to know what it's like watching somebody shoot at you. Just because you're a Jew.
So what do you make of this experience now, looking back 600 days, almost 600 days later, is sitting here now in Los Angeles, California. There's a war still going on. There are hostages still in captivity. You have a cool cane from Ukraine. What do you make of all of this? What do you say? Who is Glenn now? What is Glenn's message now? Where's Glenn going?
Glenn grew up in a South African parented household, people who experienced real apartheid. I was liberal. I grew up believing that every downtrodden people deserve someone to stand up for them. I grew up in a house where values meant something. And when October 7th happened, nobody had an option to not react. And I reacted with the foundation I had, hoping that I could feel something for the Palestinians, hoping that somebody would feel something for us in the international community and understand our pain. Neither happened. It was quite the opposite. I, as a rational person who studied counterterrorism in the Middle East and had spent a fair amount of time in the Middle East, I can say that the way I see the situation has severely changed because I tried to retain a little bit of that positivity, that light for peace, that underlying everything. I could still be that idealistic kid who thought wonderful things of coexistence and things like that. But the Jew I am now is not blind. It's not stupid anymore. I'm not sitting here saying kumbaya. People tried to kill us in the 40s, and they almost succeeded. And everything we saw lead up to that is kind of happening now, and it's very disconcerting. So I realized I might not be able to stand in front of people's bullets anymore, but I can sure make some word bullets of my own. And that's hopefully my new ammunition for getting into this fight. My new enemy is anti-Semitism. My experiences in my life and all of the insane things I've been through. I know we didn't get to talk about the kidnapping, but it definitely helped a lot. I'm that Jew now. I never used to wear Magen David out. I couldn't represent myself and my identity. I drifted away from it.
You were shameful of it?
No, I just professionally it wasn't something that people did. You didn't show a cross or a this or a that. You kept professional. There was a sense of professionalism. And because I worked with everybody. I worked with people who don't think Jews have the right to exist. They still took my services. But what changed was I went out and bought the biggest one I could find. It's pretty small. I think I'm just going to progressively get bigger until it's like Flava Flav clock.
With a clock. Yeah.
But I also wear this, and I wear this, and I have a flag in my car, and I realized that as the grandson of a partisan fighter who fought in Italy, who was captured by the Nazis, almost got sent to a concentration camp, and managed to make it back to my grandmother, I had the spirits of our people, my grandfather, and everybody, and I still do when I was in war, and now when I'm facing this new enemy. This is the new me. The new me is taking head on and not just the confrontational defense of Judaism. There's the reason I'm doing it, and that's the meat inside, the meat and potatoes inside. So yeah, I put on tefillin now. Yeah, I go to learning classes every now and then. I'll step into Jewish events where I find absolutely no reason to be there other than just enjoying having a presence in the Jewish community. Or put me on a stage and I'll tell you exactly what I think about anything. For better or worse. I think filterless Jews is what we need more of now. Morally driven, educated, filterless Jews.
So are you angry, looking back, and I think this might be the last question, or I might answer one more. Are you angry with what has been taking place or what has happened to you? Or have you taken what your experience and saying, you know what, I can channel this in a way? I mean, I'm kind of hearing that right now, is that you have become the voice, a vocal piece, and you said, I'm going to be defending myself, not necessarily with bullets, but with words, with fighting anti-Semitism. So it sounds to me like it's a shame that you had to go through this physically. But we've talked about this in previous episodes, that God puts us in situations. We might not understand necessarily why he puts us in situations, but there's an opportunity for growth, connection, self-actualization, really connecting with something deeper than yourself. Again, God forbid you had to go through something like this, but do you feel now that you are maybe more of a self-actualized person, or you're closer to your purpose here on this planet from this incident?
I think after October 7th and everything that followed until today, and the new job I play in life, a new role I play in the community, and my new approach to life, I think it's got a lot to do with me adjusting my perspective. You know what? I didn't like that one. Can you ask the question again?
You know, we learn in Judaism that everything is for a purpose. There's a statement in the Talmud that says, Gamzu Latova. Everything is this is also for the good. Now, it's very easy to be like, God, I'm pissed off at you. Why did you do this to me? This is bad. But really, when you break it down, the definition of bad is really something that just doesn't feel good to us. But if you look at through the lens of God, is that everything is for the good. Everything is an opportunity to connect, to grow, to be more self-actualized. Do you feel that this incident has given you that, even though objectively you went through something physically very painful, something that could have slowed you down physically? But do you feel that you are a different person now, post your incident that took place on October 29th, after being in Gaza?
I think I am the person I wanted to be my whole life on steroids now. I am taking chances that I wouldn't have taken before October 7th. I am having conversations and trying things that I wouldn't have done before. And I think that's because I just always used to play the middle of the road. I think a lot of Jews today, we really want to play the middle of the road. We don't want to paint a target on our backs. We don't want to show up to a Torah class because maybe somebody's watching the Torah class, or we don't want to go to a protest because, we're scared for one reason or another, or we have a complicated relationship with our concept of, what's above us. I think all the seventh did was sort of open my eyes to how much more complex and wonderful my relationship can be with not only myself, but my community and Hashem. And as somebody who didn't grow up religious at all, grew up conservative or reform, you see God in war. you see God in war. You can't really not.
It says in the Talmud, there's no atheist in a foxhole.
It's exactly right. And the other statement you said it was a
Gamzu Latova.
Gamzu Latova. You realize, much like I have this wonderful tattoo on my arm, not very halachic, I get it. But it's very important, okay? And what it essentially speaks to is Gamzu Latova. The bad and the good. The dark and the light. The experiences.
It's a Zev. It's a wolf.
That's the wolf inside all of us. And we feed both of them because they're very crucial to who we are and how we can better the world, is use our dark for motivation, use our light for love and tikkun olam. I think after the seventh, I'm no longer living in a fantasy world. And this too will show in the future that it was Letova. It was for the best. We needed this. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you so much, Glenn. Really so honored that you came out here and shared your story. And I think I'm inspired, and I know that our viewers will also be inspired from your honesty, your integrity, your authenticity, you putting yourself out there, and the message that you just shared with us just now, that life is short. Like, what are we doing it for? Are we doing it for other people? Or are we doing it for ourselves? And I think what we just gathered from this story is that you're now truly being yourself. And it's a shame that we literally our backs have to be put against the wall for us to wake up. Wake up, you sleepyhead. Yeah. And all of us are living too comfortably. Too much complacency, not pushing the limit. And you just shared with us, like, I got nothing to lose other than just being myself and sharing with the world. Who is Glenn? Who is Glenn the Jew? Who is Glenn the person who has what to contribute? So thank you for that.
Can't thank you enough. What you're doing here, guys, love it. And just keep pushing. That's my message to everybody. Like, share, take part, speak. Say 3 words. Makes a difference.
Amen. Whew.